So this is the first episode in a new series called Athlete Head to Head, where I'm going to look at two professional athletes and compare their abilities. So this first video is having a look at Maxwell Hennasby, who's an American athlete, and comparing him to Pedro Salgado, a Portuguese athlete. Both of these guys are incredibly talented, so no discredit to either athlete. This is not intended to slam what people can or cannot do. It's to illustrate 2 points. It's to look at the point that I'm trying to illustrate with these athletes, basically, which is a particular element of the way they move, and to work on a broader principle, which is the ability to see what's actually happening when you're looking at movement, and to draw observations from what you're seeing, and to better understand both what's happening in them and then what's happening in you when you're moving as well. So the clip that really caught my attention and made me start to do this series is this clip here, with both Pedro Salgado and Maxwell Hennasby doing a running pre. And the more I looked at this clip, the more I noticed lots of really interesting things to point out. So this is the clip here. Now what I'd really like people to pay attention to in this clip is the angle of the person's thigh bone, which is this bone here, to their torso. So in Pedro Salgado's case, his torso is pretty much a straight line, up and down. And the angle of his thigh bone on the torso is this. So the angle in question is this angle here. And as you can see, it's going backwards. This is called hip extension, and it is the ability to allow the thigh bone to move backwards on the torso. And Pedro Salgado was getting a lot of hip extension in this jump. And if we now have a look at Maxwell Hennasby completing the same takeoff, what we'll notice is that this is his torso here. It's actually slightly further forwards than Pedro's. It's not quite vertical. And the angle of his leg on that is something closer to this. So you can see this angle here is not actually in hip extension at all. He has maybe got to neutral. So he's got quite close to making a straight line, although maybe not even quite there. And this is the thing that Maxwell Hennasby cannot do as well as Pedro Salgado. And it really hurts his ability to perform movement skills. You can really see this as well on the step before the takeoff leg. So we can see on Maxwell here at his takeoff, the angle is leg here, torso here, still about 0, maybe even slightly less than 0. I think this was a generous line that I drew here, probably something a little bit steeper. And it kind of gives him the feeling of having shorter steps than he needs to. If we have a look at Pedro's last step, we can see his torso is again much more upright, and his leg is coming back this way again on it. It's a different angle. And what it means is it really allows Pedro to have a more powerful jump, to have his foot in contact with the ground for longer, thus able to apply more force and jump differently. And it really gives a different quality of movement to the one that Maxwell produces. So you can sort of see the long luxuriousness of the step and the distance versus the kind of the stunted shortness of Maxwell's jump. And the feeling for the two movements is very different. You can see the length and the choppiness of it, the kind of shortness of those steps, and the way the movement is kind of cut back a little bit by his limitations, which is really his inability to get into as much hip extension as Pedro is able to get into. Another quick thing to mention is that they are jumping off opposite legs. So in this instance, Pedro is jumping off his right foot, and Maxwell is jumping off his left foot. Now, generally, most people have a dominant leg that they prefer to jump off, and much more often than not, that is because the athlete is able to get more hip extension on that leg, which means that they're able to apply force into the ground for longer, and usually they are much more comfortable jumping off that leg, and will prioritize it whenever a jump is hard. what I think is really interesting about Pedro is that he's actually quite competent jumping off both. So Maxwell favors his left and will always jump off his left. Pedro seems to be able to do both. In this jump here, he's doing his right, but in one later on, he'll be doing his left. So this is another clip that illustrates it quite well, I think. This is just a running brie done by Max off his left foot, as per usual, and then a running brie done by Pedro, in this case, off his left foot as well. Now what we can really see in these two run-ups is the difference in step size that the two athletes are producing, and this is usually a direct symptom of how much hip extension they can get. So Maxwell, it almost looks like he's taking too many steps, and that's because he is taking too many steps for what would be ideal. You can sort of see it has a short, choppy feel, and he really is kind of struggling to build up the speed that he wants to be building up. And he's also really forced to make sure he gets onto his left foot for his left foot takeoff, which is the foot that he really wants to be on. Now if we get to Pedro, we can really see the length in his steps. It's not quite sideways, but I assure you that if we could see it sideways, it would be. Yeah, there we go. You can really see this nice angle forming, and really, especially on this takeoff here, really exceptional hip extension, and it really allows him to generate huge amounts of speed and power. So really notice in this line from Maxwell how often he stays in kind of a flex position, and how really he gets into a lot of extension. The angles that he produces are always quite short. Not to say that Maxwell is particularly bad at this, he's actually a really talented athlete, but you can see these angles, gets close to zero often, but doesn't really get into any kind of luxurious hip extension. And the whole line kind of has a feeling of being a bit choppy and short, like there's not as much thing. And the reason I think this is really interesting is because Maxwell Hennasby has a lot of muscle. He's a really big guy. He's not tall, but he's big. Like, he's built. He has a large amount of muscle, especially around his glutes and hamstrings, which are the muscles that are doing most of the work in these jumping activities. Like, especially around through here, he's just like developed. And he does a lot of strength training. And I don't think this strength training is actually helping him. Pedro Salgado is not as big as him. He's a much smaller guy, but his jumps, I would say, are definitely bigger, and they look better as well, and I think they're more functional as well. And Pedro does not do weight training, and I don't think this weight training is particularly helping Maxwell, because strength is not his problem. He's an extremely strong guy, and there's no question about it. It's more his ability to use that strength, and doing weighted body weight, more strength movements, I don't think is going to help him achieve that. And I don't believe that, I'll get into this in more detail, that doing any mobility exercises would either. This video is much more about seeing something rather than the ability to change it. So this is a somewhat similar line from Pedro Salgado now. And has a very different quality to the line that Maxwell would produce. He doesn't seem particularly limited or like he's preferencing one foot over another. And you can really see the angles that he's producing are really nice hip extension. So you can see really on this one here, like that nice upright torso and this leg coming backwards off of it. And it just looks great. And it really gives him a lot more flow, a lot more speed, a lot more power, a lot more control. I mean, having your foot on the ground for longer just means you have an advantage in all these respects. It even means, like, as the leg swings through, it has more momentum to carry him through to the next movement. And it gives the quality of the movement that he's producing a really different feel. And it's lovely to watch. I think all movement that is done well generally looks good and feels good for the viewer, and that's something to really pay attention to too. Like, what does it feel like to watch it? Which is not to say that they're not both amazing athletes. As you can see some clips here from Maxwell, he has his own strengths that I don't know if Pedro could emulate in the way that he does. And Pedro has his own strengths too that I don't know if Maxwell could emulate either. So yeah, there's lots of other things that go into the makeup of an athlete. This is just one particular element of the way these guys are moving, but it really is something that is very good to start looking out for and see if you can see in your own movement and others' movements, to really see if you can notice the hip extension. There's a couple of other things to look at, how it affects a couple of other athletes. I'm going to quickly show one clip of one of the Tap brothers moving here. I'd like to see if you can work out how much hip extension he is getting. Spoiler alert, not that much. And it really I like this clip because I feel like your limitations often end up defining your style. I don't think people truly appreciate to what extent this is true. Like, if you really can't do something, even if it's as simple as the way you're using your legs, it really ends up defining the way your movement looks and the way your movement feels when people watch it. And it really is a significant part of moving. So this is another clip of a lady walking in slow motion. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because it illustrates another really good point, is that people can kind of make it look like they have hip extension when they don't. So this lady here, you might say, well, look at how long her steps are. Look, you get to the end of her step and you're thinking, yeah, that's some hip extension, right? But unfortunately she's cheating. So if you'd say, oh, look, this is a torso and this is a leg, she's getting hip extension. It's a clever trick she's playing on you. What she's actually doing is she is curved like a frickin' banana, and her leg is here. So the actual angle we're looking at, she's actually still in a lot of hip flexion, which is the opposite to extension. So she hasn't got into any hip extension at all. She's just making it look like she has. And this is something you'll see a lot, and it's something else to really look out for, is what's their spine doing? Because in the examples we were looking at before with Pedro and Max, their spines were actually like this, and this lady is definitely not doing that. So if she did actually manage to have her spine straight through all this, she would be getting hip extension, but she's not. And that is something that people will do all the time. Now we have a clip of just like some really, really, really talented athletes. It's really nice just to watch people who do an excellent job of it. So generally, if someone is world class at something, they're doing an amazing job. So this is Usain Bolt doing some running. You look at these angles here. He's incredible. Really, really good hip extension. If you could produce this kind of hip extension as a parkour athlete, and I think it is possible, the movement results you'd be able to produce would be exceptional. So that's something to think about. But it's also worth remembering this video is not a hard to do, this is a hard to see. So stay tuned for more information and more videos. Let me know if you guys have any questions or any things that you'd like me to talk about in particular. I'm prepared to go into lots of detail. I love getting deep on it. So let me know, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Cheers.